The unfortunate truth is that right now, there is a huge attack on federal workers in this country.
Federal employees do not deserve their jobs. Federal employees do not deserve their paychecks.
Now, even hearing this sounds crazy because working for the federal government has always been looked at as one of the most secure jobs that there is. I've worked for the federal government before, for the United States Department of Agriculture and the United States Postal Service. And as a career employee, it's kind of hard to get fired, and layoffs were not a thing we really had to worry about. Even during the Great Recession, which was roughly between 2007 and 2009, the DC metro area still had one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country because of so many people working for the federal government. So it really didn't hit this area quite like it did other parts of the country. But now, here we are, just a month and a half into President Trump's presidency, and already thousands of federal workers have been laid off. And this is exactly what prompted a group of former employees to rally outside of HUD's office in DC.
As cuts continue to the federal workforce, dozens of former employees and lawmakers rallied outside the Department of Housing and Urban Development today in DC. They're pleading with the Trump administration to stop cuts that they say will impact affordable housing.
Now, these cuts are all thanks to the newly formed Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, which is headed by none other than Elon Musk. And it's tasked with rooting out waste and fraud in the federal government. And ever since they've had authorization granted to them by President Trump, they've been cutting jobs and programs left and right.
You're fired. Get the hell out. Get the hell out of here.
And yes, this may be saving money up front, but this can have dire consequences down the line, especially when it comes to the economy and housing in this country. The health of a local housing market is closely tied to the health of the workforce. And with a lot of federal employees residing in the DC area, home prices in DC have already fallen 11% since the beginning of the year. Now, I'm gonna be honest, DC homes are ridiculously high, but this also has effects on housing markets in neighboring states, Maryland and Virginia as well. And I'm a licensed real estate agent in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, so this can affect me and my business. So you see how DOGE laying off thousands of federal employees can have a ripple effect. It's not just the laid off employees that will feel it, their families and local economies will feel it as well. There's already been a spike in unemployment claims in the capital area. And with all this craziness and confusion that's going on with the federal government, with layoffs and unemployment, which can affect local businesses and the housing market, this may lead to a recession. Now, it's hard to say that it will definitely happen, especially with such a small sample size, but when you look up what creates a recession, it says financial crisis, supply and demand shocks, and government policies. Now, with financial crisis, it says falling house prices and rising unemployment can lead to financial crisis. Check. For supply and demand shocks, it says supply shocks occur when something reduces the economy's ability to produce, and demand shocks occur when something reduces businesses and households' willingness to consume and invest. After only 2 months, it's hard to say that there are any significant supply and demand shocks. But for government policies, it says fiscal policy decisions such as tax increases or cuts in government spending can dampen economic activity. Check. So as of now, that's 2 out of 3. But again, it's only been 2 months, and only time will tell if we are actually headed into a recession. But like I said, these massive layoffs may impact us more than we know. And a group of individuals that I know it will impact, the individuals who depend on these programs where these employees are getting laid off, whether the programs are cut or not. So for instance, if you're a Section 8 tenant, even though they didn't cut the Section 8 program, let's just say they decided to lay off a massive amount of employees who work in the Section 8 program, then this will obviously affect those who benefit from the Section 8 program. It's already not the most efficiently ran program as is. Imagine if they lost a good amount of their employees. That would make things a lot more harder and a lot more stressful to deal with. So far, according to CNN, there's been about 780 employees laid off from HUD. However, word around town is that the department is considering cutting over 4,000 positions. Now, it's no exact word on which programs would be losing these positions, but either way, I'm sure it'll have some effect on the department. I do know that Project 25 is set in motion. As a HUD task force was created, just like it said it would, the affirmative further and fair housing rule was just canceled, just like it said it would, and Scott Turner has other plans up his sleeve as well. For example, as far as rental assistance, it was just reported that Scott Turner is considering putting time limits and work requirements for tenants, which is also in Project 25. So it's pretty clear to see that Project 25 is set in motion. I know that the project did want to go in the direction of focusing on voucher programs as opposed to public housing, and there's a few reasons why they would want to do this. Number one, the government owns public housing buildings. They're the landlords. So if they're the ones who own it, and they're also the ones who are paying the rent for family families to live in there, that means they're paying themselves, which mean that they're not paying anything and they're not making any money. In fact, it's costing them money because they're still responsible for the upkeep, the maintenance, wear and tear, insurance. These are all costs that the landlord is responsible for. So I'm sure they see public housing as a big money pit that they're not making any return on and still have to come out of pocket for all of these expenses, as opposed to the Housing Choice Voucher program where these properties are privately owned. So now private landlords are responsible for the upkeep, the maintenance, the insurance, etc. They're the ones who have to foot these bills. Number two, as opposed to public housing, with the Housing Choice Voucher program, the voucher holder is responsible to go out and find a place to live. So guess what? If they can't find somewhere to live, the government can say, hey, it's not our fault. We tried to help you. We gave you a voucher. Never mind the fact that there are 10 times as many voucher holders than there are landlords, and nothing is being done to solve that problem. But since there are so many voucher holders who can't find housing, now the federal government can use that as an excuse to cut funding. Hey, local housing authorities, why are we giving you all this money when a huge portion of these vouchers aren't getting used? You know what? We're cutting the budget. Since you only use this many vouchers, this is how much money you need. Of course, they'll want to get rid of public housing and only focus on housing vouchers. And number three, if a big portion of rent is being paid to a private landlord from government funding, then that landlord has to pay taxes. The landlord is also going to go out and spend money, whether they go to a local Target or a restaurant. And guess what? The Target and the restaurant also has to pay taxes. And those businesses also have to pay their employees. And guess what? The employees have to pay taxes. So that money is constantly being circulated in the economy. And the federal government is steady getting their cut from each and every person in business that money has been passed to. So the government is actually getting some money back by paying the private landlord, as opposed to owning the public housing building and footing the entire bill for the public housing tenants. These are all reasons why the federal government would want to distance itself from public housing and strictly focus on voucher programs. But even with that being said, everything that's going on right now is creating an even bigger problem for the Housing Choice Voucher program. All of this confusion and uncertainty is driving landlords away, and it's already been an ongoing problem trying to get landlords to participate in the program to begin with. But now, with all of this talk of funding freezes and late payments and changes to the program, it's making things even worse. Now, I've been receiving my payments on time, and as of right now, it's still business as usual, which is why I needed to head to Houston to get this Section 8 rental property ready to be rented out. Me and my handyman, we got the job done. This house is ready to be listed. Hopefully we can find a high quality Section 8 tenant. So right now, with everything that's going on in this country, people are kind of weary with the idea of Section 8 investing. They don't know if it's gonna be around, if they're gonna change laws, if they're gonna get rid of it. Now, like I've stated my opinion before, the idea of providing rental assistance have been around for almost 100 years. Section 8 has been around for like 50 years. They're not gonna get rid of it as it pertains to vouchers. They do wanna get rid of Section 8 project-based housing, but that don't have nothing to do with private landlords. But it's still very understandable why anyone would be weary to pursue the idea of Section 8 investing. But the good thing about owning a property is you have multiple strategies that you can use to make income. You don't have to rent it through the Section 8 program. Say if they did, just worst case scenarios, say if they just said, we're getting rid of the Housing Choice Voucher program, then I just use my properties and rent them out to people who don't have vouchers. I mean, it is unfortunate, but landlords do have options. But like I said, Housing Choice Vouchers, the government is going to provide assistance. Elderly, disabled, veterans, low income, the government is going to provide assistance. As long as you do what you're supposed to do as a landlord, then you can be successful. You have to make sure the property makes sense to be an investment. Not all properties are good investments. I personally don't like condos. The condo fee is too high. I try to get properties that aren't in HOAs because I don't want to pay any extra fees for someone to tell me to do what I got to do. The location of the property. The location is more important than the property itself, because you'd much rather have a bad house in a good location than a good house in a bad location. If you have a bad house in a good location, that location is going to bring the value of your property up. So always value the location over the property itself. If your property is in a good location, you have a better chance of finding a good tenant. So those are three of the most important factors when it comes to investing: the house, the location, and the tenant. But then you got to make sure you have Reserves, that's another important factor. I say all the time, reserve funds and a good tenant, you're on your way to success as a landlord, as a real estate investor. But yeah, like I said, business as usual. Anyone who is interested in my Section 8 Investors course and coaching program, make sure you sign up. The link is in the description, and I do have a coupon code that y'all can use to get some money off. So thank you guys for watching, and like always, look forward to seeing you guys in the next video.